Hi there, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live premiere, appreciate it. Today we're focusing more on a singular topic and talking point, and it's referring back to that very important key piece of evidence that was recovered previously, that time-lapse video on Dylan's phone, which had incriminating evidence upon Brenner, which probably led to him being charged, the catalyst behind it all. But as for the footage itself, it still remains a mystery as to what truly was caught on camera and what it really looked like. We've had visual descriptions from the likes of Justin Rounds, so wouldn't people take that enough to believe in it, especially those that deny it being a video in the first place, and yet haven't they heard it from Justin Rounds in those interviews? I wonder what's going on there. Well, overall, I just want to question the possibilities that a firearm which showed up in that footage may or may have not been used in the murder of Dylan Rounds, and that's what I want to talk about today. Later on, we can look back at comments and acknowledge them, catch up there on other discussions within the case, answer any questions, etc. So make sure to stick around for most of this video to understand. Shout out to the regular people that do watch, and of course Skeptical last night for their super chat, very good of them. And it was Skeptical's birthday yesterday, if you weren't aware. So once again, happy late birthday. And yeah, we just kick things off tonight with another bit of coverage on Dylan Rounds. As a heads up, if people weren't fully aware, this is my 403rd video on the Dylan Rounds case. I did actually reach the 400 mark on videos made, which is more than anybody else out there and probably people combined together. It's just one of those things. There's been stuff to talk about, and you know what's kind of ironic is just recently I was trying to take a break, but then all of a sudden all this news came out, these new articles, etc. It was like it was trying to drag me back in, which is a bit odd. But this video is one I should have done a while ago, but I never got round to doing it because there was other stuff to do and sometimes I forgot. So hopefully it can be more centered about this one particular thing today, right? So in the past, you may have known I've done some singular videos. One was to do with some like grave site near to an airstrip in Montello that was cleared up and explained. Then I think I did another one maybe on the gun and key fob. And that was just on the basis of, well, whether it has or hasn't been taken by anyone, regardless, it was worded as no prints on the key fob or gun. So why wouldn't there be prints upon those items? Surely some form of DNA would still be on them, especially when the last person used them, such as Dylan Rounds. So someone must have wiped it all off. That's just like a little thing in its own right, so don't go too deep there. If I haven't already mentioned that point, maybe I can bring it up again in a different video, a short video, straight to the point. So then when people watch, the only thing they can respond back with is to that one thing, because that was the length of the video. So there's no harm in doing these like little focus points, right? As recently, I say the chat's been under control. We've not really had too many problems or issues from at least what I can remember. So that's all good there. People still focus on the case, which is what you always want to see. But yeah, you can share your own thoughts, opinions and reactions in the live chat today. And if you want to talk about a range of other stuff, feel free to do so. But as for, the background stuff, there's not really much to say there besides, if you're just watching this video now or you're new to the channel and you haven't seen the latest breaking news in the Dylan Rounds case, which just came about recently, well, make sure to check back, make sure to catch up on my last video I did. It might even be in the pinned comment section, the link to it. But make sure to try and find and watch it because it did mention some new interesting developments, including evidence, etc. And to be fair, we probably can touch upon that as well, maybe later in this video, or you know what, why not just bring it up now, because we can always refer back to these points down the line, right? We can filter stuff out, we can really minimize it down the line. So I think it might have been Tom Evans, maybe somebody else, whoever, that mentioned this whole guessing game. It's a shame that they haven't, explained more behind it. I don't know if it was Tom or maybe it was June. I know they've got pink profile pictures, but whoever it was, what's my take on it? What's my take on the fact that new evidence, DNA evidence, has been found by dogs, but it's not described as to who it belongs to, the DNA, and what the item actually is? We're just left guessing, like usual, like all the other times. Well, I think this all comes down to levels of expectation and maybe a little bit of entitlement. Would anyone be complaining right now if it was so vague, if the Dylan Rounds case was vaguely covered to begin with? I wonder. I bet there'd be less people complaining there. Just to put things into perspective, and I'm just going to use a very quick example to compare to this nature. So because I covered the Dylan Rounds case and I do it quite regularly, and I also attend all live premieres, if at one point I decided to have a break, a true break, or I just wanted to cut things down, take a little step back, I would probably be criticised, crucified, and beyond questioned for that because I'm going against the routine. It's built certain expectations up to a high degree that if I don't meet those thresholds in the future or I take a little dip, then it's most noticeable and people complain and whine. But if I was consistently shit, consistently infrequent with my upload schedule, then no one would be questioning at all or saying anything. You get what I'm saying? So how does that apply to the Dylan Rounds case? Well, with the Dylan Rounds case, at the start at least, it was more, more communication, more vocal, verbal, positive or negative. Like Candice Cooley at first wanted help from the general public, wanted people to get involved in some way or another. Her herself wanted to spread herself onto YouTube platform to get her words out and to spread awareness there. So it was kind of more hands-on at the start. And the way information was talked about, even if it was sensitive, Candice Cooley publicly revealed it at times where it felt like things weren't going exactly to plan by the likes of the LE. But then from then till now, massive shift and change. Now it's all very quiet and above board, in the background, more secretive. You could say there's more control now. There's less issues, better cooperation and coordination in the background at least, and improved communication and transparency, at least with their own little groups they've got going in the background. But as for the general public, who are so used to seeing the routine of it all being publicly aired and talked about informally or formally back then, it's a sudden change to now where people suddenly feel, oh, I don't like this. Oh, we should demand to hear about this, and we should demand to know exactly what those details are and what these things are. And yet some people in the past were saying, well, what do you expect? Not everything can be talked about publicly. Not everything can be opened up by the police. If something's going on in the background and it's important, it's going to be kept that way. Okay then, so when something finally comes about like that and it's vaguely worded, now these people are complaining, saying, oh, I don't like guessing, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. It's like, you've done a complete U-turn, a little bit of a contradiction, hypocrisy there, isn't it? Typical. I mean, it doesn't bother me too much, right? I mean, you could say, well, surely, ref, this would impact you. This would be bad if there's less communication, if there's less stuff being talked about. Then that means no more videos, less material to work with. And I'm just like, bitch, please. End of the day, Kenny Veach case, very limited material for some time. And, bits here and there, still managed. Sometimes all you need is your mind. Well, that's if you got one. And just to use your own thoughts and opinions, draft stuff, create stories, but within an appropriate control and reason behind it. Guess, use common sense, use your imagination. There's no harm in that. People could see it as storytelling, trying to reconstruct what happened in an educational way, and others may see it as an entertaining way of telling a story. Not causing any harm there, is it? But one thing it's most definitely doing is filling in the blank atmosphere. So it's not as dull and it's not as quiet. That's what I said. Where it feels like you guessing, who cares? It's just guessing. It's not the end of the world. There are other people, channels, but let's not just say channels, but audience members as well that are on those channels out there that may spread BS or may really lock on and focus into a particular event that happened in a case which actually never happened, but they convinced themselves so much that it did happen. And there's other people that follow BS and go with it, roll with it, and then eventually it turns out not to be true. They do a U-turn, and then suddenly they're agreeing with what some of the family say, some of the points mentioned by the official news articles, and it's like, oh, well, you change your tune all of a sudden. And you know what the key pattern is? When it comes to the true crime community and people act like prats and idiots at times, and they form allegiances with the wrong band of people when they've disbanded afterwards, they don't even acknowledge it. No, they just try and play it off in a cool and calm, collective way. Well, I don't have to worry about that because I've been doing it as a lone wolf since day fucking one. So, you know, whilst other people act like prats, I try not to do that. I mean, other times messing about, but that's something completely different, right? So that's another talk in its own right when it comes to true crime community. If you'd like me to analyse the true crime community, and it doesn't just apply to Dylan Rounds, it applies to all the communities out there with the different cases. If you want me to try and summarise or analyse it, I can do so, because there is an alternative outlook on the TCC. That's what it's, you know, short for, if people didn't know. So it's kind of all over, right? But guessing, well, no harm. You guess to pass time, to try and make sense of stuff. And sometimes you can be right. You know, I've demonstrated it on my channel with some of the storytelling, reconstructions of the map, how things played out, right? Could we do a reconstruction on today's topic? Well, we can in a way. We can actually put that into practice, so feel free to listen along. So yeah, as for that new evidence, you want to hear a bit more about it and some additional details, be sure to check back on the previous video I did. But, you know, just to kick things off, let's just focus right into that time lapse, right? That key piece of evidence from Dylan's phone, right? So some people out there like Corey, maybe even Bob wouldn't be surprised, that will say that time lapse, it wasn't a video. It was a collection of photos taken at different times or something. See, I'm going to explain what like time lapse is, okay, if you didn't know, because I do have extensive experience behind it because I have done it myself, right? I guess you could call it, there's two forms of time lapse. On some devices they call it hyperlapse, same thing, just sped up, right? So yes, you can have photos taken at different days or different times throughout the day, right? An example would be when some people take photos every single day for an entire year straight and then piece it together in almost like a video construct and then put it on a certain speed, and then you just see like the transformation from day to day. So like if people were doing weight loss, if someone was measuring their visual appearance on aging from 1 to 40 years of age, and they take a photo every single day from then till on, and then piece it all together, and then hit the play button, and then it's like a sketchbook. You know, if you're not going to do it with digital media, you can have a sketchbook. You can write, we'll draw a stick figure, a pivot on one of the pages. Then the next page, you draw the same thing, but in a slightly different position. So it looks like it's constantly running. You know, you can call it animation that, but just different times of time lapses done at different times, different points. And when it's all pieced together, it creates almost like a flowing, effortless video, right? If you want to look at it that way. The other way about it is where you just simply hit the record button under one of the certain camera modes, time-lapse, hyperlapse. It records it in normal time, let's say 5 hours, looking at a plant or the sky. And as soon as you've pressed stop recording, it renders it, it cuts it down, and it basically just speeds up the video of the entire length of the 5 hours or more, however long you recorded it. But because it's sped up automatically after, it shortens the length of the video itself, because you're not watching at literal 5 hours worth of 5-hour footage. You're looking at a sped up version of it, so it's going to be shorter in length. So you tend to do these hyperlapse, time-lapse videos if you're trying to document something with a slow process, a slow growth. So, you know, when you're looking at a plant, if you just sit there and watch it grow, you're not going to see that change as clearly. But if you put a camera down, recorded it, walked away, and came back in a few days' time, and you looked at the video back, sped up, you'd see the change and the growth quicker and more effectively. So that's why people do stuff like that. So why would Dylan Rounds have a time lapse on his phone then? What would be the reason for that? Accidental? Well, this is the thing. It originally started off, people were under the assumption that it was Dylan Rounds that decided to hit the record button on his phone to document his own death. That there was an angel watching over the case to use as evidence in the future if Dylan didn't make it out alive. But as time's gone on, and from what the family have said, they believe it was Brenner that accidentally hit the record button, right? Either way, there is some kind of media on that phone, right? And for those like Corey and others to say that it's not a video, it's just a collection of photos, well, how come Justin Rounds was able to recall what he saw, as in it was as if he was recalling watching video footage, the way he was sat there and the way he stood up and the way he was then going to the sink to wash his hands, right? You know, if it was just a photo and depending on the angle of it, you could be up against the sink, just stood there in a still shot with your hands in front of you. The camera can't see exactly what you're doing because there's no movement or motion, right? It's kind of like if you were up against a wall, stood there in a still photo, they'd probably just think you just, I don't know, looking at a wall. There's not much behind it. But if it was in a video format and they saw a bit of movement, swaying, tugging with the hand, droplets below, then it'll be identified as, oh, that person's taking a piss. But would you be able to identify that in a photo from a certain angle? No. But in video format, you'd be able to notice because of the movement of the person. And then maybe when they turn around and stuff. That's what I would say. And as well, if it's like a time lapse of photos, at least from the devices I have used, that doesn't seem to exist. The only way it'd be doable is if you had the phone and you literally pressed take a photo multiple times, or you hold it down for a length of time and then it takes multiple photos. And then you can piece it all together in like a photo album digitally, turn it into like a video and press the play button, and then you'll see the gradual change like an animation, but in still format, pieced together. Stop motion, is that what it's called? It might be. So, and as well, you got to take in mind, Dylan did not have the latest iPhone. It was kind of an older version. So it would have been limited as for technology and what it could be capable of compared to the latest phone models, right? And the quality as well. But that aside, at least some media upon that phone which depicts Brenner present, blood on him, and DNA belonging to Dylan from that shirt. Yes, it didn't say that the blood is directly Dylan's, but who else would it be? Because Brenner didn't look hurt, did he? And we've not seen or heard any other characters that appeared injured at the time, so you'd use common sense and suggest that likely that blood is from Dylan, because who else blood would it be? Because we've not heard anything else, we've not seen any other leads, we've not heard any stories, not even any BS stories which suggest somebody else was killed or hurt in the process. Not at all. So likely that blood on Brenner's shirt at the time did belong to Dylan, as well as the evidence, DNA evidence belonging to Dylan. So just a quick reference back, when we think of that new latest DNA evidence found, whose DNA does it belong to? Dylan or Brenner or somebody else? Feel free to share your thoughts down below. I think we did a poll last night. I can't remember how many people voted, but you want to add on to that, you know, feel free to do so. But as I was saying, the main details which haven't been questioned enough, been suggested in the chat, but I said I wanted to do an actual video about it, is it was described by Justin Rounds, Candace Cooley, more so Justin, because they saw the footage, or they saw the media, right? 27 seconds long. Outsiders and viewers strongly believe that it was longer than 27 seconds. But in my opinion, at least, if it was a time-lapse video, yes, it's 27 seconds, but the unedited version could be 5, 10, 20 minutes long. But because it's gone through that processing of a hyperlapse, time-lapse feature, it's kind of sped it all up. And now, is there any way of being able to revert back to the original version of the video before it was sped up and shortened in length? At least from what I'm aware of, I don't think so, unless maybe you've got the later models and phones where you can actually revert back to the original. Because I know there's other devices out there, maybe Android, where you could save a photo, edit a video picture or something, then save it, and then that's it. You can't undo it. It's its own copy now. Well, it's not its own copy. It has replaced the original piece of media. Whereas with the later devices nowadays, more so with Apple, you could have a photo, you could have a video, you could adjust it, you could change it, aspect ratio, you could mute it, you could change the color tone, the features, whatever. Then you got the option to save it as a new video, so the original one still retains its original characteristics, and then you got a new edited copy of that. Or you can save the new changes and overwrite the original piece of media, but you still got the revert button, which resets it back to default afterwards. I don't think that feature was present if Dylan had an older iPhone. It depends which version he had, right? Just these like little limitations you got to acknowledge, okay? But yeah, this footage, Brenner, more so with the gun in his hand, cleaning it. Why would Brenner be cleaning a gun? Well, like how any other person would, to like good hygiene, like with oneself, hygiene, cleanliness, keeping it functional, usable, so it doesn't get blocked, it doesn't get damaged, it doesn't rust, it doesn't, just to keep it nice and clean for one's own self reasons, right? Maybe you like clean guns, maybe you like shining them up, maybe because you want to just maintain them so they're still functional and effective to use if there's ever a need to. Maybe it's just a pastime, maybe it's a satisfying thing to do, shining up a gun or cleaning it in some way, right? It's like a normal, I don't know if you call it an activity, maybe a chore. It's like a normal thing to do if you, I guess, own a gun. Now, are you going to be cleaning it more or less times? Well, that depends on how often that firearm is used, right? I guess if it's fired a lot, maybe the barrel might need cleaning out or so, depending which model it is and stuff. This is the thing, what's the model of that firearm? It was never really explained, which is kind of unfortunate. Will we ever know? I don't know, it's this late on. It's a key detail. I'm just surprised it wasn't really talked about. That's what I mean. Maybe there's more questions to this than maybe what I thought when starting this video off. But just to reiterate, if people have just joined, my question I want to throw out to you, and feel free to discuss it, talk about it throughout this entire video if you wish to, is that time-lapse media of which depicts Brenner in his trailer after the supposed murder of Dylan Rounds, cleaning a firearm, which has not been identified publicly as to what firearm it was or what model or who did it truly belong to. That activity of cleaning that gun, is there a chance that what Brenner had in his hand was what was used 30 minutes ago on the day when taking out Dylan? Do you agree with that or not? Do you think there is a small possibility that that firearm that was being cleaned by Brenner in that footage was the firearm which was stolen from the Dylan's farm, which was then later returned back on a different day? Or, for those that believe strongly that that firearm of Dylan's never left his farm property to begin with, then, okay, then do you think that the firearm that Brenner had in his possession in that footage, did that belong to him? And as a follow-up question to that, do you think it's that chrome pistol handgun, the one Ty Corbin mentioned, which has never been retrieved, recovered since? And if it's never been retrieved, recovered since, do you think, as a follow-up question to that, could be maybe the key new evidence with DNA upon it, which was found recently, as we saw in that article, I think I'd probably go one step back and say probably not, because if in that footage it showed Brenner cleaning down, well, let's actually, to be honest, was Brenner wearing gloves in that footage? That's been my first thought, right? Regardless of where that firearm came from, right? You can clean down a gun, maybe just clean it because it's dirty, it's rusted, it's got mud in, or the barrel needs cleaning out, it's a bit clogged up. But even when you clean that all off, are you cleaning it off, fingerprints? Most likely not, because whilst you're holding the gun and fumbling it around in your hands, well, your prints are getting all over the firearm, right? Unless you want to be super clean and you don't want to leave any marks left behind, maybe you wear gloves, right? Maybe you lay the gun, firearm on a cloth and then use another cloth to wipe it down, possibly. You get what I'm saying? I don't know if Brenner was wearing gloves at the time. If he was wearing gloves at the time, and he cleaned it all down and then he disposed of it whilst wearing gloves, then technically that new DNA evidence that was found recently probably wouldn't apply to that firearm of Brenner's, because there wouldn't have been any prints left on it. But if that really was the case, it'd be more likely that if it did apply to Dylan Brown's firearm that was taken at the time of the murder and somehow tied into this, then it would explain as to why when it was returned back there was no prints found upon it, because it was cleaned down. And if Brenner was the one recorded in that time-lapse footage of him doing that, then that explains to why then later there was no prints upon it, like it was cleaned down, because Brenner cleaned it down, right, on that condition. But in my own opinion, I still don't think that it was Dylan's firearm in that footage. I mean, granted, that footage is after Dylan's death from how it adds up on the time lapse, but it's after that point, 7:27 a.m. of that time lapse video of Brenner holding a firearm in his hand. It couldn't be Dylan's because it was after 7:43. However long it took to get down to Dylan's trailer was when the next phone ping was of Dylan's down at the farm. So that's later, past 7:27. So Brenner's already in possession of a firearm in his trailer. It can't be Dylan's because it's afterwards he then goes on down to that farm, Dylan's, to then maybe search about. And if he did take Dylan's firearm at that point, well, that footage earlier on, Brenner was already in possession of a different firearm, so it can't be the same one, right? Just a thought there. That's why I wanted to mention that. So likely the firearm in that time lapse probably wasn't Dylan's firearm, because the parents didn't mention anything about that, did they? Not even Justin. No one getting emotional there about like Dylan's own possession being used against him, because I'm sure the family would probably have identified that, and maybe Justin would have got slightly triggered by it too, because it's like, wow, it's like I don't know if people would interpret it as like an insult, using someone's own tools against them. Is that the right thing to do? I don't know. It might annoy people out there. You'd get a response from it, but there was no response there. The way it was told by Justin Rounds about, there was a firearm. Justin did say that the time-lapse video itself overall, and seeing the blood on Brenner, it was surreal. It was kind of emotional, but also hard to believe too, watching the after effect of the person and the way they were acting kind of cool and calm and a bit cold in a sense. They didn't show much emotion. So overall, the footage would have impacted the family, and that's understandable, not exactly moments, but just after what's happened, and you're looking back, reflecting on it, small portion, it seems a bit weird watching it, right? Just as weird as it would be if you was to watch the execution of Dylan at the time of when it happened. Obviously it wasn't recorded, but if it was, that would be probably hard to watch as well, more so for the family point of view, having to watch it in front of them. So I would say we're taking that all into consideration, because I'm doing it on the spot, right, with reasoning ability. I feel that there is a high chance, like what we saw with that recent article by Candice Cooley, where she said herself she does believe that Brenner shot Dylan. Besides Candice Cooley in the past saying, oh, it was just a snap moment and then he did whatever to Dylan, Candice Cooley specifically said likely that Brenner shot Dylan, so with a firearm. But what firearm? Dylan's firearm? Probably not. If Dylan's firearm was back at Dylan's farm and not in his possession at the time, and Brenner already had his own firearm or a firearm, it just wouldn't link two separate ones. Okay? So, could it be Brenner's personal firearm? Yeah. Well, if that's the case, the next question to follow up with, and let me know your thoughts, is, well, if that firearm in that time-lapse footage was also used earlier to take Dylan rounds out, was that firearm then passed on to Don Hatley to keep a hold of, along with some other firearms? And then after Don hearing about what's happened, whether it be through Brenner or somebody else, Don thought, I don't want to be in possession of these firearms because they might think it was me that shot Dylan, so I'll pass them back and I'll be like a snake in the grass and grass on Brenner. I'm not going to take the fall for this. You think that's too far? You think that's possible? In my opinion, what I would personally say is, it can't be the case. It can't be. I don't think Brenner passed on that firearm, which could have been used from that time-lapse footage to kill Dylan, to then be passed on to Don Hatley, simply because those firearm charges on Brenner, in possession of firearm, being a felon, they've been described as unrelated to the Dylan Rounds case, separate, not applicable. They don't link to Dylan's case, separate charges, right? So if the separate charges, then it must mean that all those firearms, none of them were used in the murder of Dylan Rounds, that case, because surely by now they would have been able to identify it. If they were able to identify the shirt that Brenner was wearing on that day from that footage and then retrieve it afterwards, then surely they would have been able to watch the media or look at the photo, a still screenshot of that firearm, pause it, zoom on in, check what model it is, the serial number, the brand, what type of firearm it is to begin with. Is it a handgun, a revolver, some kind of rifle, air rifle, AR, very unlikely, shotgun, sawed-off shotgun, etc. You'd be able to identify it likely by the shape, size of it, and then maybe compare that photo to the seized firearms handed in by Don Hatley to see if there is a match. And if there was a match, then surely that firearm charge, even though it's separate, one or two of them would still tie in with the case and murder of Dylan because there is some form of link to be made. None of that happened. So it would make me think back and probably acknowledge that Ty Corbyn's original point about a chrome handgun missing still to this day could be the firearm which appeared in that time-lapse footage, which may have also been used on the day and the murder of Dylan Rounds. Because it's not been mentioned since, has it? It's not been mentioned by Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds. Yes, they brought up and descriptively mentioned that Brenner was cleaning a gun, but not much follow-up on it. They didn't really elaborate, and you thought surely you would elaborate, because if you're acknowledging that based on the time stamps, it all seems to line up in the order that Dylan was murdered within a 30-minute period, which then led to Brenner the aftermath of cleaning up and washing his hands off the blood. Because once again, while some people out there doubt that the blood on Brenner at the time belonged to Dylan, isn't it a bit of a coincidence how within a 30-minute period you go from no blood on you to then suddenly blood on you, which just happens to tie in line with a murder of somebody in that time frame, and DNA from them onto that shirt besides the blood. It's very coincidental. That's why you use common sense, right? I know some people can get very awkward and critical and say, nope, I need evidence to prove this, to prove that. Sometimes, and maybe in the court of law, this does not apply whatsoever, but just in general day-to-day life, sometimes you don't need full-on evidence to prove something. Sometimes it's staring right at you in the face, and you just use your own common sense and thoughts to acknowledge it. But not everyone has that, so maybe other people need full-on evidence just for it to get through the skull. But I still think that till this day, that even if there was hard evidence, and I mean hard evidence to prove these points, people still wouldn't be satisfied and still complain. As you know, I've got ideas out there when it comes to certain people. So I do think that the firearm in that time lapse should have been elaborated more, right? But I feel by doing this video and by talking it through with my own thoughts on the spot, this is all raw, it's unscripted, there's no script, there's no lines, there's no bullet points, this is just all on the go, right? But being able to talk this through, I was able to eliminate the possibilities of certain outcomes of where the firearm came from and who it belonged to. Does that make sense? Now, if Brenner had a chrome handgun, did it belong to him in the first place? And when did he acquire that firearm? I don't know. Maybe Ty Corbin would know, but I know Ty probably doesn't watch these videos anymore because of the whingy whininess in the past, as you know, pulled out through a hedge backwards with the hair all over the place, kind of like what I've done right now. So there we go. Very, very not under control, the hair this time, but no hat either. So if there's any additional points you want to add on with regards to that firearm in the time lapse, feel free to do so. Maybe if we wanted to really simplify it, okay? And I don't know if I've done it as a poll already, so I'll just say it in this video. Do you think that the firearm in that time lapse footage was the murder weapon used against Dylan Rounds? Yes or no? Because it's not been mentioned, right? It's not really been identified or brought up. Be led to presume it's still missing. This is the thing. They talk about finding Dylan Rounds and finding evidence, but not at any point has Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds mentioned we need to find the murder weapon. It's all been about we need to find Dylan or we need Brenner to be punished. Nothing in between along the lines of, maybe we need to find the murder weapon because then it could trace back to the murderer. Or maybe if we do find the murder weapon, it could help provide a bit of closure, a better understanding as to how Dylan Rounds was murdered, because it is a key piece on the timeline, right? I don't know, maybe some people want the closure of how did Dylan Rounds die? Was it fast? Was it slow? Was it painful or painless? It's a form of closure. And when people are talking about closure, and Candice Cooley did in the past, and now saying there's not going to be any closure, well, that's a contradiction there. You know, you can have full closure, you can have a little bit of closure along the way, right? But it's as if maybe certain family members don't want closure. I'm not talking about jumping into the deep end of family members don't want to find Dylan, but more so family members aren't prioritizing certain thoughts and evidence out there which could help, you know, bring closure as to how Dylan was murdered and maybe where that item came from, possibly. Maybe it's harder out there because firearms could be distributed illegally and stolen as well, so it's not like you can find a weapon and trace it back to the store and look through the books of who ordered it and when. That probably doesn't apply here, which is unfortunate, but still, there is Dylan Rounds out there. Even though not as a missing alive person, the remains are still missing, but as well, there's not been any evidence up to now, besides who probably did it, Brenner, there's not been any evidence to point as to how Dylan Rounds was killed. And that's what I find very weird and odd. And I don't know if this should be, you know, a video by itself or something. I mean, we've done videos in the past where I talked it through in the grain shed property as to possible methods and what was found in the grain shed. Was it strangulation? Was it being punched repeatedly? A blunt instrument, a sharp instrument, etc. Just trying to work things out. But there's just not been much talk about it. And as for, you know, residue, forensics, ballistics, none of that has happened. See, this is the thing. There's a possibility we may have already known by now as to how Dylan Rounds was murdered if the grain shed property was treated like a crime scene to begin with. And the reason why I say that, if it was treated as a crime scene, it would have been taped off. It would have prevented the spring cleaning from happening, so whatever was left in there would have remained, could have been key evidence. And as well, treated as a crime scene, a homicide, may have tested for a ballistic report, may have tested for gun residue, any loose spent casings, cartridges, any bullet holes in the roof, the walls, or anything like that. Because if you get shot, you know, I guess it depends the caliber and everything and what's present, but a bullet can pass through you and come out the back or the side, ricochet, whatever. And then it could create a hole in the wall, the back wall, a bookshelf, I don't know. But that was never followed up, right? So really, what was actually done besides searching for Dylan Rounds? Going about searching about for clues. Where is Dylan Rounds? But not directly searching for clues as to where did Dylan Rounds die? Where did Dylan Rounds get hurt? Where did it all come to an end? None of these questions have ever really come about to this degree or strength, right? It feels like maybe, as for creating videos besides audience members, I feel like maybe I'm the only one going in this hard but this late. But the only reason why I'm doing it now is just because of this whole talk about the firearm. As I said earlier, much deeper than I thought this video was going to be. Not just a simple question of, was this firearm used in a time-lapse, yes or no, but how was it used? When was it used? Is there any evidence of it found anywhere? Is it still missing? Has it been buried? Was it chucked into the pond? No update, no talk about it. And you know what? Just another question, okay? Let's say Dylan Rounds is eventually found, and I guess would they do an autopsy, or they'd like analyze it or something to check the cause of death, I guess. And I guess if there's damage to the bone or like a hole in the skull, let's just say, then you could probably say, oh, the person was shot. But just as a follow-up to that, if that ever came about and it was proven that Dylan Rounds was shot and that's how he died, the end, and then justice for Dylan, conviction, etc., did he ever make an attempt to try and relocate that firearm wherever it was dumped at? Or does it just get forgotten about because the case is over and done with now? Any additional evidence out there? Never mind. But then what happens if someone in the future ends up finding Brenner's firearm that was used to kill Dylan Rounds? What happens to it? Do people just take it away as a souvenir? Those who are not even aware of the case, do they just take it away with them? Who gets it? Where does it go? Does it get handed in? I mean, if it's after the case, then it's no longer really any evidence because the case has been closed, so it's not seen as evidence anymore, even though it'd be considered more of a historical artifact or so in a previous event. Makes me think. But what it also goes to show, because it puts it into perspective once again, despite the case dragging on this long and with hearing this latest news article saying about new DNA evidence found out there, which you'd assume DNA evidence, upon an item, possibly, there are still things out there tied with the Dylan Rounds case. So, how much more is out there besides the remains? How many more items are spread about out there, if there is any? That would be my overall question. There's a lot of questions today, but will there be answers? Maybe people don't have the answers, but if you just want to share your thoughts, give your opinions, make sure to do so down below. And I feel it's most definitely worth, if you can and if you want, to share this video to spread further awareness about this stuff, because it's just not been talked about enough. And maybe sometimes it has been elsewhere, but within a 6-hour-long video where it's jumbled up with all other kinds of things, talking about carrots and melons and cactuses, which has no link to the case, right? Anything else I want to add on in? Not at this moment, but I do think that because it wasn't treated as a crime scene, the grain shed, not enough was done, right? I mean, with that hole where it was dug out and some kind of biological matter being found there, said by the shack lady, originally passed on from Candice Howard, but Candice coolly never mentioned about the hole in the grain shed nor acknowledged it. Justin Rounds never mentioned about the hole in the grain shed nor acknowledged it. Even when the two were in the grain shed at the time, earlier on with Heavy D inside of the grain shed with the chairs, the lawn chairs, just in front of that hole, there was no reference made either back then. Just about how do you feel being here where it supposedly happened. Nothing about the hole behind them. Why something like that, which is so obvious, stands out, was even included in the photo by Justin Rounds when Justin in the past, in 2022, was at the grain shed property at night time and took a photo looking inside from his truck. No reference to that dirt mound with the hole nearby. No mention in the Heavy D interview. Why something that is, in a way, publicly posted and publicly viewable stands out, just not referenced, not mentioned, not referred back to? Why? Why, in a way, so secretive, but at the same time so public, viewable? You get what I'm saying? There might be things going on in the background of the Dylan Rounds case which we've never heard of nor seen. But with regards to this, we've seen it, but it's not really been acknowledged by Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds in any of the articles. So what is going on there? Not even in the court documents from what we last looked at. What is going on there? Does anyone agree? It's so weird. It's weird when something is publicly viewable but never publicly acknowledged by the family or the officials. In general, they could say evidence was found here or DNA was found there. And to take in mind that Candice Cooley, I don't know, months ago now, mentioned that those two final hit locations as which was highlighted by Indiana recently, that being the pond, supposedly, and the grain shed property, that no forensics were done. Well, if no forensics were done inside the grain shed property, then why is there a bloody hole in the ground where it looked like something has been taken away? Then, if Candice Cooley was strongly saying that there was no forensics done inside of the shed, then why did Candice Howard, a third-party person who's not tied with the case but friends with Candice Cooley, passed information on to the shack lady, in which then the shack lady mentioned it publicly about some kind of DNA being found inside the shed? If Candice Cooley originally said, well, not originally, more so at a later point after all this, a few months ago, saying no forensics were done. Well, so why is there a hole there? And why is it not being acknowledged? But why is publicly Candice Cooley saying it's not been forensically tested? Is that like a ploy to confuse people, to play it off? Well, really, if that was honestly the case, then why did Justin Rounds make that public photo? Why did Heavy D and the family decide to do the video inside of the grain shed when, you know, you got the hole in the background? Or did they do it in such a way that the chairs were set up to cover that hole, even though it's publicly visible? That's why they didn't try filling it in to try and, you know, smoothing things out. Like, I can understand, the only time I can understand where Candice Cooley went against the truth was at the beginning, when she had no choice but to preserve and help and save the case from being damaged. And the only example of that is at the start on the NAM-US database, where the police accidentally revealed sensitive information which shouldn't have been revealed in the first place. It was posted publicly, it was retracted later, but in the meantime of us hearing about it publicly, Candice Cooley had to deny it and go against the truth because she was advised to by the police, and it was done in a way to preserve and protect the case because that sensitive information shouldn't have come about in the first place. So an example like that, you can understand as to why you've got to go against the truth. But when it comes to the forensics and what was found or what wasn't found this late on into the case, and now Candice Cooley recently, well, months ago, said that no forensics were done in these two hit locations where the dogs reacted, including the grain shed. Well, if no forensics were tested, then why is there a hole there? Maybe you could say, whether it be Candice Cooley, the dog crew, or somebody dug it up where the dog was reacting but never actually took a sample away to then take to the labs. so it got forgotten about. That's the only way I would think of it, because if there was no forensics, then there would be no need to analyse or search the insides of the shed. There'd be no need to then make a hole. I know this is going away from the talk about the firearm in the time-lapse footage, but what I'm trying to add on in is, if that is the spot where Dylan was killed, right, then you tie in with, well, how was he killed? And did that bullet go into the ground? Did it ricochet into the ground, embed itself? Was it taken away? Has any bullet cartridges or anything like that been found besides a firearm out there? Doesn't seem to be the case. Dylan has not been found yet, and the murder weapon has not been found yet, and the attachments to that murder weapon, if it's like the usage of a bullet, has not been recovered yet either. That's why you see those other videos, more so in recent time, by Lance Kelly, that goes about searching for the bones and bits and bobs, which at times probably could be impractical and a bit silly, but here and there, Lance Kelly come across bullets and cartridges, pointing it out. Now, if you talk about the open, the vast desert, maybe it wouldn't be a surprise. And we saw it on Google Earth as well, these bullet cases here and there and spread about on mounds and hills. But that's because of hunters, hunter season, people going out there hunting animals. There will be spent cartridges out there, right? So it's just about not getting too suspicious about those things. And even at Sun Tunnels, there was bullet cartridges there too, right? So really, if he's going to come across bullet casings, anything like that, it'd be more applicable and appropriate is if it was near or literally within the grain shed property, the grain shed itself. If that's the final spot where Dylan was alive and also where he was taken out, then you'd have to pinpoint it there and then look about and think, well, where did the bullet come from? What angle? And where would it have gone to after? Would it have gone up here, down there, straight ahead? You know, just a problem. The problem is with the grain shed itself, I did try looking myself, okay? I'm not the police, but I actually tried looking myself for bullet holes. And it was kind of difficult because there were several holes in the shed, high up and low down, most of which were natural wear and tear, right? But were there any bullet holes which were present, which I missed out on? And this is the other thing. If Dylan Rounds was shot, how many times was he shot? And where was he shot? Maybe most of that will probably, if there's no ballistics and there's nothing like that and no follow-up there because it's gone on this long, the only way you probably find out is once the remains have been recovered and then it's been, I don't know, like an autopsy or something to try and break down and understand what actually happened and how. So maybe that is probably the long-term game. That's, you know, if you want to hear about those details, it's right at the very end of the case, which we're nowhere near at this moment in time, right? So if I do have any more points, I'll add on later. But what I want to do now is acknowledge the previous comments from the other video on Dylan Rounds. You know, if you are joining right now and you want to hear about the main topics and very important, interesting questions, rewind back to the start of this video, okay? That aside, as for those that are still watching, appreciate that. Let's head on over to the previous YouTube comments to see if there's any questions that need answering or if there's any additional interesting information. I will just arrange it to the newest. I don't think we've got that many comments to get through, to be honest. So what was that point there? Oh yeah, so the previous video that I did cover as well was also Justin Round's reaction to hearing about Brenner's court hearing being delayed and pushed back. I wasn't able to fit everything into the title at the time, so just wanted to point that out. Lone Wolf says, the other medium said his body was in the wash. And when we talk about medium, we're not talking about extra large or extra small. No, it's about a medium that like communicates, contacts the paranormal side, really. And as for mediums or psychics, it's not exactly gone to plan because out of 100%, what's been the success rate? Fuck all, okay? Tiny Alien saying, what medium? So, okay. What, you want an extra large? What? Anyway, out of context there. Do I think that mediums and psychics, card readers, tarot cards, bits and bobs, shine your crystal and shove it up from the back end, are they effective in this case? In terms of finding Dylan, no, because Dylan's still missing. In terms of solving the case, no, because it's still ongoing. In terms of proving certain points correct, maybe, on how things played out, yeah. But I was able to do that myself without any crystals, without any dangly bits and bobs upon me. None of that was required. I just used common sense and still reached the same conclusion with certain points, right? See, I've come across psychics, readers, and all that stuff in the Kenny Veach case, and it didn't lead to anything. To be honest, when it came to the Kenny Veach case and search, when people were out there trying to look for Kenny at points in times, hikers, but when they did receive information from whoever out there who are not even from that state or maybe country, and they say, well, you know, I'm going to contact this hiker and say that Kenny Veach is actually over that way, so you probably should go and check. And that's what they did. Did they find Kenny? No. Did they waste their time? Yes. Did they risk their lives? Absolutely. So sometimes listening to those psychics and mediums and extra larges, I mean just mediums and stuff like that, it could actually put you in more danger than it's worth. So you get what I'm saying? Moving on. What does June say here? Saying, I wish Arizona Traveler still had his videos up on his channel, especially the one area he showed where it was already dug up for some line being put in. Brenner could have used a backhoe, and with all the tracks around there and freshly dug up ground, no one would think anything of it. I'm probably not explaining it correctly, but does anyone remember that video? Me personally, I don't remember that video. But if there's anybody watching right now, just let me know your thoughts. Do you know what June is referring to? Could you elaborate further? Is it a place we need to look at on the maps? Let me know. Are we talking about the line dug up at the Grainshed property? Or are we talking about further afar? I mean, I didn't really watch Arizona Traveler's videos, but my question would be, why did Arizona Traveler delete his videos? Why did he back off? Is it because Candice Cooley Justin Rounds told him to? If that really was the case, then why has Lance Kelly, Ty Corbin kept their videos up then? What's the difference with Arizona Traveler? Is it because Arizona Traveler was too close to the truth? Is that a possibility? I mean, what other possibilities could it be? I mean, if you're told to take something down, it's because they don't like you covering it. They don't like you reporting on it. They don't like that you're getting too close to the truth or too close to an important area. Is it still an important area to this day? If not, then why can't the video be re-uploaded then? Why has Arizona Traveler backed off so easily when he's so passionate about fake hair and wigs and the salty pancakes mentality of being a bit of a knob at times and not really contributing to the case in the chat, but talking about other nonsense? What's going on there with that mentality? I wonder. You get what I'm saying? People switching and changing in personality, behavioural traits, all of that. We're not just talking about someone backing off or taking a break or moving on to other things. We're talking about changes, visible ones, noticeable ones, right? We're not talking about a warlike ref, red amber alert report. Oh my God, he's been swept away into the distance, man. Oh my God, the hurricanes are coming on fast. The cats and dogs are raining down. The poor sheep's wool going to get blown right off and it's going to land on Indiana's head. But at least it'll keep her warm. More insulation so the heating cost is not at a high crisis. But that aside, we're like rats being blown away into the ocean, man. King Samoan's in there. The King Salmon of Poseidon. Oh my goodness, it's going to be such a great adventure, man. Oh, but there's going to be little conspiracies, because where's Wally Ref gone? Where's a little Refy boy? Where's a little carrot? I don't know. Maybe it's been chopped off. Yeah. And speaking of carrots and cucumbers being chopped off, what happened to Minnie Mouse? You remember? Was it Minnie Mickey? Mickey Minnie? Minnie Mouse? You remember that whingy whiner on my channel at one point from Salty Pancakes channel? What actually happened to them? Where did they go? I don't know. Did they change their username? Surely. They must have done. Yeah. There'll be people from my channel in the past that have gone away because they don't like the drama. They don't like my channel and where it's all going. But then they go elsewhere and it's just as bad, if not worse. So what's going on with their priorities? I need to get it straight, girl. My God, it's a bitch-ass dickhead. That aside, I think it's now time to move on with the other comments. Cleo saying, oh, what a way to end an interesting video. I feel if Justin did the interview, it would be the same outcome as Candice, just in style. Right. Me personally, I think the outcome of that interview would have been significantly different, because there's a chance that Justin Rounds probably wouldn't be willing to talk in the first place. But if we are really basing it on the conditions that Justin Rounds was willing to talk, how much would he say? Cleo believes talk about the same stuff. I don't know. I don't know if Justin would be a bit more conservative. What he says, would he withhold stuff compared to Candice Cooley? Because Candice Cooley talks more and is more open, whether she's right or wrong. And that might be because she's passionate at the time, or there's a thing that's annoyed her, frustrated her, so then she talks out. When it comes to Justin Rounds, well, I guess when Justin Rounds gets annoyed, he does share his true thoughts and emotion, which is natural and genuine. But is it based on facts? Not always. He more talks out openly in reaction to when he's maybe a bit pissed off and stuff, and it's just more his raw emotion. But when it comes to actually mentioning information or key updates, it's more Candice Cooley that does that, whether she is right or wrong. As we've seen recently, like with that court hearing being pushed back, delayed, Candice Cooley explained it formally on the Facebook page in an emotionless state. Justin Rounds mentioned it in an emotion, with emotion, expressing himself. But did he actually provide the dates of when the next hearing has been scheduled? No. So Justin was more genuine there, but did not follow with the facts. Candice Cooley was emotionless, but did follow through formally. So give and take, right? So I think the article could have ended up slightly differently. Maybe there might have been a bit more of a focus on Don Hatley if Justin had more the chance to talk, and if he was the only one there. Weezer saying, Raf, sorry, I should have sent you a link to this article. The article is the one I was referencing, so we're in the same direction there, which is all good. Let me know, Weezer, your thoughts about that article. What do you think was found? Glenn, shout out to Glenn. Spook saying, our courts are corrupt. Okay. Tiny Alien saying this case was impacted by so many. So what, are you saying that collectively, so people within the case and people like outsiders? Jacqueline, very interesting, thanks, you're welcome, Jacqueline. So, okay, fair enough, it looks like we've reached the end of the comment section. All in all, I think that summarises it for now. A focused collective video, maybe it started off new discussions or new perspectives. If you want to elaborate, add further comments, leave them down below. You want to check out previous videos and view other links, there's some down below in the pinned comments section. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I think we'll leave it there for now. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, goodbye and good night.